It's Nicholas Dingle here again to show you some VB.NET 2013. In this video, let's have a look at some loops, okay? The main thing that I try to get across to my students, and this is what I'm going to keep at the top of the video for the whole thing. If you feel like you are repeating yourself, you are, okay? And if you feel like that way, use loops, alright? If you feel like you're repeating code and you're copying and pasting it like crazy, I want you to make sure you start using some loops. All right? This video is going to play as an introduction to the loops. We're going to have a look at the three different types that I like to use. Okay, there is a fourth that will come later, and I'll show you the syntax, how they work, and then finally we'll have a bit of a try around with some of them. Later on down the future, we're going to have a look at some actual applications for some loops. So at the end of the video, if you don't quite understand it and you still can't research it very well, I'd recommend we have a look at some of the future videos, and hopefully they will show you some practical applications for loops. So let's have a look at this. The simplest example I like to use for the moment, put in hello world again. I'm sure you're all sick of that by now. But let's say, for instance, I want to write this. So write hello world 50 times. No, let's minimize that, 10 times. All right, that's pretty straightforward. Okay, right now, it's just a matter of copying and pasting this line, Control C, 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so if I run my program, F5, 10 hello worlds pop up on the screen. But what if I wanted to do that 100 times? I'd have to copy and paste that 10 more times, and I'm not going to do that because I'm, well, lazy and I know better. So basically, if you start feeling like you need to repeat something, okay, you want to start using some loops. And there are three types of loops. And the first one I always like to show is the while loop. All right? And with this while loop, what it does is we set up a condition, just like an if statement. And while that condition is true, we keep on repeating the code inside. As soon as that condition becomes false, we stop. All right? Now, I want to repeat this 100 times. So the problem is I need to know how many times I've already looped it. I need to know how many times to continue to loop it. But for the sake of examples, I'm going to forget this 100 times, and I'm going to do an infinite amount of times. So what I'm going to do is go while, and I told you the condition, while it's true. So I'm just going to type in true. It's going to keep repeating. Now, it's given me an error because it doesn't have an end while. I'll just pop it down here. All right. So there's the top of our loop, there's the bottom of our loop. Everything in between gets repeated. So if I press play, you might see it's still appearing down the bottom. That's an infinite loop. If you're ever using a program and it gets locked up, okay, and stops responding, and Windows is telling you it has stopped responding, what's happened is it's stuck in this infinite loop, and it can never escape because true is always going to be true. Okay, it never becomes, the only time a while loop will stop is when it's false. Okay, so loops can be dangerous. So if I change this to false and run my program, nothing ever happens because false jumps straight over. Let's do an actual example, like while 5 is less than 9. Okay, that's going to equate to being true. Exact same thing we had initially. It's just going to loop forever. All right, and let me exit my program. I'll force it to close. Not a good idea to do loops like this, okay? Later on, there might be a place to have an infinite loop, but generally there'll be a way to get out of it somehow, okay? But really, let's come back to repeating hello world 100 times only. So I need something to count how many times we've looped. So I'm going to dim an integer, which starts at 0, okay? And while I is less than 100, we're going to write to the screen. So press play. Unfortunately, it just keeps going forever again. Now, the reason this is because I is always going to be 0. So 0 is always going to be less than 100. So the idea is we now need to, once we've written hello world to the screen, we increase the value of I by 1. Another word for that is increment. Okay? And the easiest way to write it on the screen is I plus equals 1. So what that's saying is add 1 to I. So if I run my program now, there we go. That's hello world 100 times. It's really hard to see how many times that's actually occurred. So what I can do is actually include I in my right line. So let's do an I ampersand, hello world, and you should be able to see the number and then the words hello world. Let's put a space there. That'd be nicer too. There we go. So you might say, well, it stopped at 99, but if I scroll at the top, it started at 0. If you count from 0 all the way to 99, you've got 100 values. Okay, so I is just counting up by 1 at this case. Alright, and this here is our while loop. So what's our syntax for our while loop? Well, it's pretty easy. While, condition, you do your instructions, and then you end while. So there's your syntax for the while loop, everybody. So the idea being that the condition has to be true, and the instructions keep getting executed. Alright, let's scroll down past my Mr. While, and let's have a look at the next one, which is your do loop until. I'm going to put a ... there. Alright, Visual Basic's a bit weird. We can put in the do. Let's put that. And then it puts in the word loop automatically for us, which is quite cool. I'm going to put the word until. And for example's sake, I'm going to do the exact same example. I'm going to write hello world to the screen 100 times. Alright, but I'm going to use a new variable. Instead of I, I'm just going to use j. Okay, just to be simple for this one. Dim j as integer equals 0. Okay, and in here, let's right line to the screen. Let's go j and hello world. Alright, loop until j equals 100. So you may have already noticed the difference between a while loop. It's upside down, for instance. Condition in a while loop's at the top. Condition at a do until is at the bottom. So this means that there is the chance this loop may never happen. In this loop, the instructions will always happen at least once. So this one has the opportunity to go from 0 to 100. This one has the opportunity to go from 1 to 100, if that makes sense. Now, let me just quickly get rid of... I'm not going to get rid of my while loop. I'm going to comment it out, though. Comment, 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 comment. And let's just focus on the do until. And there's our problem. Okay, it's doing the exact same thing. It's looping infinitely because I'm not increasing the value of my j. It's always 0. So let's just go j plus equals 1 and run it. All the way to a 99. 0 to 99. That's exactly what it should do. So, moving along from that, let's say, for instance, I just put j equals 0, okay? Nope, let's say j equals 1. So it's going to start at 0, it'll write to the screen. Okay, well, what's a good example I can put there? J is greater than or equal to 0. Alright, so anything larger than 0, it's going to stop. So this loop continues until while this condition is false. As soon as it becomes true, it stops looping. That's the biggest difference. So let's kick it into gear. Only writes once because j is greater than or equal to 0. Now, in a while loop, if I did that, if I did this type of thing, the code would never be executed. Alright, but let's just keep that as j until j equals 100. Okay, so our syntax for this one, everyone, is pretty straightforward. Do, then you've got your instruction under that, and then you've got loop, until, and your condition. Remembering that the condition will always loop if it's false. Alright, so stop the video if you want to have a go at that, but let's move on to the final type of loop. As I said before, this is more of a demonstration video, and I'll show you one example at the end before we go though. It's called the for loop, and it's probably the most important loop. Right? Let me quickly label these loops for you before I go too far. This one up here, the while loop, is called a pretest loop. Alright, and the reason it's called a pretest loop is we do the test before we execute the code. Okay? So for the while loop, not the while loop, the do loop until loop, this is called a post-test loop because our condition or our test is underneath our instruction. So this one here for the for loop, it's known as an iterative loop. Okay? Or a counter loop. There are a couple of names for it. But the idea for a for loop is if you want to loop a set amount of times, Let's say we want to loop 100 times. We know exactly how many times we want to loop. This is when you would use a for loop. Okay, it's counting loop. So if I go for, what have I got? I've used I, I've used J, let's use K as an integer, and I go equals after it. So I want to count from 0 to 99 because I want to do it 100 times. Okay, 99, and then we do our right line, and we can go K, and let's do the old hello world one more time. Okay, this sets up a counter for us. What it does is it will set the value of K to 0 to begin with. It will execute this line of code, and it will come back up here, and it will increase the value of K by 1, come down here, and then do the code until we hit the value 99. Look at that. How easy is that? You don't even have to have the K plus equals 1. If I put K plus equals 1, it's actually going to increase it by 2 each time. See, 52, 54, 56, all the way down to 98. All right? So you do not need this line of code for a for loop. And the great thing about a for loop is we have more control about where it starts. So I can start at minus 50 and go to 150. Goes all the way right up. But let's say, for instance, I want to count backwards. All right? Let's say I want to start at 99 and go down to 100. For whatever reason, we use this thing called a step. It specifies how to increment between each loop. So, how do I want to increment? Well, before it was incrementing by 1, I want to increment by minus 1 in this particular case. So if I press play, starting at 99, working all of our way down to 0, and then we're done. So that there is a for loop, and these are very, very powerful. There is a fourth type of loop called a for each. However, we have to sort of get into arrays and things like that before we have a look at it, and that's going to be in a couple of videos. All right, so what's our syntax for a for loop? Well, it's for, then we have the variable name as in the data type. Now, interestingly enough, I'm going to introduce some square brackets around this because it's optional. You don't actually have to have this as data type. I could just have 4K, but it's bad practice, okay? So you're best off having 4K as integer, okay? Equals your start number to your end number, put a capital T, Nick, and then you optionally can have step and the value of that step. All right, so that's a pretty long-winded one, okay? You've got, for the variable name, you have to have a variable name, optionally have this bit, equals the starting number to the end number, and you optionally can change how it increments. So I can actually show you another example. Inside here we have the instructions, and then we have next, meaning the next value that we want to use. So let's quickly swap this back around to 0 to 99. Let's say I want to skip every second number, or let's say I want to increment by 5. I can actually do that by just going step 5 and running my program. 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, and so forth. Okay, so it's doing every 5 numbers. Okay, and as soon as it gets to 99 or above 99, it stops. And there we go, everybody. There's our 3 types of loops. We have our while, our do until, and our for loop. As I said before, we'll do the other one later. All right, let's do an example. Stop the video. I'll just leave the picture on the while loop for a second. I'll move down on the do loop for a second, and then the for loop for a second. Stop the video at any point if you want to try one of them out. I'm going to delete all this code, and we're going to have a look at an actual example of how to use a while loop in a program. Okay, so let's say, for instance, we have a menu. Let's bring back the menu from the other one. Select from the following. Okay, and then we'll have, A is an apple. Copying and pasting, I'm sorry everyone, just for speed. B, C, banana, banana. Then we have carrot. And finally, we need, no, I need that, sorry. The last option is going to be quit. Okay? So the whole idea of this program is we're going to repeatedly ask them what their favorite food is. All right? Let's go console write for a nice little message. Your choice. And then to actually remember something, we need a variable, don't we? So we need to dim, like the last program, selection as a char. And to get the value from them, we're going to go console.readKey and .keychar. Okay, get the user's choice. Okay, sorry for knocking the mic. All right, so let's quickly put in a select case for selection. So if they type in A, they like apples. You love apples. Well, and we can do it again for case B and C. Lots of copying and pasting. I'm sorry, everyone. You love bananas. You love carrots. And interestingly enough, we're not going to check if they typed in the letter D, okay? What we are going to check, though, is if they don't type in D, okay? Is not equal to D, if that makes any sense, because we want them to be able to type in D, but we want to exit the application at that point. Okay, but if they type in anything else, such as F or G or H or I, we want to be able to say it's an invalid, well, not an invalid choice. What did I say last time? I said you don't like food. Something like that. All right, if I run my program now, let's type in A. Whoa, I forgot to rekey. A, you love apples. B, you love bananas. C, you love carrots. That's really ugly. I hate how it comes up on the same line. So what I'm going to do to fix that, let's put a right line there. Okay. And put a comment here. Check what they selected. That's better. Comes up on the next line now because of this right line. Okay. So we've got the problem again of last time where we had a little a and then we need to be able to accept a capital A as well. Now, last time we went, if it's case A or it's case A, just like that, but we can actually use some of the functions from the previous video. Okay, a character is very similar to a string. We can actually go, convert it to a string initially, and then convert it to an upper. And what that means is we're checking just the uppercase version of whatever they typed in. So we can go a capital A, a capital B, capital C, and a capital D. And this means we only have to check one value. Because we're going to upper, there will never ever be a lowercase letter. So if I type in A, I love apples. If I go in uppercase A, I still love apples, which is exactly the way you want it. Now, the one thing I haven't tested is if they type in something different. You don't like food, fantastic. Let's say they choose G, that you don't like food. What if we choose D? Nothing happens. Perfect. Okay. What we're going to do now, everybody, is we're going to set up a loop. So this menu keeps popping up, and this keeps happening in our select case. All the while, they're not typing D. So really, we want to repeat the menu. We want to repeat them being able to choose what they like. And finally, we want to be able to repeatedly tell them what they love. Isn't that just nice? Okay. So really, all the stuff I've just selected is going to live inside of my while loop now. So above the start, while the selection, and we need to think about, all right, well, when is it going to stop? It's going to stop when they type in D. Okay, so while selection doesn't equal D, keep doing the code. Now here's the problem. We just need to quickly put in an end while down here, and there'll be one little issue we need to fix. It's going to say, what the heck is selection? Selection is not declared. It's because I'm talking about selection here, but I create selection down here. So there's a problem. So what we need to do is move this dim cut just above our while loop. Paste. Okay, and to fix this bit, just put the word selection instead of the whole dim selection as char. And all of a sudden I fix this problem. So while selection doesn't equal D, you continually repeated your menu. So quick snapshot, there's my end while under our select. There's the top. Let's press play. Let's press A. I love apples. B, C, I love carrots and bananas. If I type in D, it's paused because of the read line. I press enter, closes. So if I don't want it to pause, I'm now going to get rid of my read line. I don't need it anymore. Can you believe that? Every single video we've had one, now we don't need it. So if I type in A, H, you don't like food, D, for quit, closes our application. How beautiful is that? So that's a really quick and rough version. So some of you might be screaming at me right now that there's no uppercase or lowercase d. So we can actually do the same thing. A selection to string, to upper, a capital D, and it doesn't matter if I choose a capital D or a little d now. There we go, everybody. There's a brief introduction to loops. That's how you use them. There's our 3 different types that we're going to concern ourselves with. In the next video, we're going to look at a couple of different things. I want to look at classes primarily, which are a way of organizing variables, and it's really, really powerful, okay? It's just going to be a simple introduction to classes. Later on, we'll look at the most powerful opportunity we have with classes. Right now, hope you like loops. Have a play around with them with your whiles and your do untils and your fors. And until then, happy programming, everyone. I'll see you in the next video.